Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Take 3 Theological Variety Hour. This week we are covering love because Friday is Valentine's Day, which is a day associated with love. So we are going to dig into love and just see what's going on with it. To jump right in, I'm going to talk about a little bit about, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. It's going to be a surprise.
Yay! Surprise!
Christine is going to talk about Saint Raphael the Archangel, who's the patron of marriage, right? Correct?
Marriage and healing and demonic ass kicking. Yes.
Okay, so that all goes together for sure.
Yes. It's awful.
And then Erica is going to talk to us a little bit about the theology of the body. All right, so when preparing for this episode, this is my surprise. I don't know what I'm gonna say yet, but I'm just gonna tell you kind of my bizarre train of thought right now.
Awesome.
So for the last week, not to prepare for this episode at all, but it just sort of like worked out. I've been reading a lot of kind of different things. So if you remember last week's episode when we talked about kind of weird Catholic tales, and I told you the story about from the life of Paul the Hermit about the young Roman Christian who bit off his tongue to protect himself from, lust. The place where I found that story is in a book called The Sex Lives of Saints. It's by Virginia Burris, and it's a very difficult book. I've been trying to read it for like a few years, and it's got a lot of terminology that I don't understand.
So it's not as spicy as it sounds.
Wait,
It's not
are we
very,
talking about like medical terminology?
what? No, we're talking about like the real deal. Um, but what she does is in this text. So first of all, she's utilizing queer theory, which I never totally get. Like I've been to conferences about it, and I feel like I don't ever have a grasp on it. But she's using queer theory. She's using Michel Foucault. She's using a lot of different ways to get at what she calls the erotics of ancient hagiography. So she's kind of reading. My understanding of the text is that she's reading these ancient Christian texts and kind of trying to understand or give a new kind of understanding of how they feel about sexuality. So it's a very interesting book. The other thing I've been reading is a lot of surrealist literature. So, in sort of a weird headspace right now. And then when I was talking to Erica about what I should talk about, she said, "Why don't you talk about Abelard and Heloise?" Which, in a very strange way, kind of linked the two things that I've been looking at. So, I'm going to give you some very experimental thoughts right now. I don't know even how I feel about them, but it's what I've been thinking about. So, first of all, where does Valentine's Day come from? Saint Valentine, there's actually two Saint Valentines. Both of them were martyrs. One of them was a bishop. The other one, the more famous one, was a Roman priest who was beheaded and his body was thrown in the river. Somehow, and there's kind of debates about how this happened, different scholars have different ideas about it, but somehow Valentine becomes associated with love. In the Golden Legend, it doesn't say anything about love in relationship to Saint Valentine. It says that he tried to convince the Emperor Claudius not to worship idols anymore, and then got beheaded. That's basically all the entry in the Golden Legend says about him. So, yeah, that the tradition of him being associated with love is at least newer than the Golden Legend, or if it was around before during the Golden Legend's time of composition, then Jacobus de Voragine doesn't say anything about it. So it seems, in some ways, it seems strange to be talking about love on a day that we're remembering someone who was opponent of idolatry and then got, beheaded and thrown in the river.
I don't know. I think it's kind of fitting. But wasn't there something I remember reading about, like on those like chintzy, like the superly pious, like Catholic prayer cards and things, and they'll talk about that apparently like some Roman noblewoman was converting or had converted to Christianity, and that they were exchanging letters while he was in prison, and like he would like sign his letters, like yours, Valentine, and that sort of became the origin of exchanging Valentines and things like that. So is that just like a modern invention, or?
I don't know how modern it is, but I don't think it is. It doesn't appear in the Golden Legend at all, and I think it's a later kind of legend that comes up.
Okay.
I don't even know how old it is. It could very well be, pretty new. Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, in one of his poems, I think it's the Parliament of Fowls, talks about how there's a belief that birds choose their mates on Valentine's Day. So I think that's one of the oldest.
That's so cute.
I'm pretty sure that's one of the oldest, and that's 14th century. I think that's one of the oldest references to Valentine being associated with lovers at all. So there's that. And then, so the Virginia Burroughs text talks a lot about how, in early Christianity, there was not this. So I think now, kind of pursuant to what we talked about this morning, Christine, with your Twitter fight, there's this idea that that marriage and family and the production of children is kind of like this normalized kind of Christian mode. It's like what you're supposed to do. But, of course, it's fine to get married and have children. But the very earliest Christians, Paul in 1 Corinthians talks about how it's better to not be married. And the reason for that is because they thought Jesus was coming back like very soon. So like, why would you get married and have kids? And that's a really interesting point in this Virginia Burroughs book, is that she talks about how, this normalization of marriage is actually kind of the exception rather than the rule for early Christians, because early Christians were really focused on remaining celibate, being ascetics and things like that. So it gives kind of this flip side of the history of sexuality, to use Michel Foucault's term. And the way that I think, I won't even get into the surrealism thing because I don't want to go off on a weirdo tangent right now. But
I'm always down for weirdo tangents. I just want you to know.
I'm writing like this weird surrealist, like, I don't know what it is right now, but maybe we'll talk about it when I'm done. But it's like, it's kind of getting all my thoughts together, so I don't even know if I'll share it. But how I thought that bridged with, kind of this story of lovers and Abelard and Heloise is that Abelard and Heloise, as kind of this great, quote unquote, great love story. Well, basically, Abelard gets Heloise pregnant when he's supposed to be tutoring her in Latin and Greek. And
wait. In fairness, which was more fun? I just,
well, I think we
Latin
know what
Greek.
Abelard and Heloise thought was more fun.
Sexy.
So first of all, I was just rereading Abelard's Historia Calamitatum, where he complains about his life for pages and pages. Basically, Abelard gets Heloise pregnant, and then her uncle gets really upset. And Abelard essentially forces Heloise into a convent, and she doesn't really want to go. And then her uncle castrates Abelard. And then they supposedly exchanged these love letters, which some scholars think were all written by Abelard, and I wouldn't put it past them.
Wait. So Abelard was writing love letters, maybe, possibly, to himself?
Well, he and writing in the voice of Heloise, you know.
I assume there's some basis for this thought.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot of the background on that theory. I haven't I haven't done any work with it myself, but I know that I've heard that before. So, Abelard definitely makes up characters. They think the quote unquote monk from his Historia Calamitatum is probably made up. Because essentially the Historia Calamitatum is supposedly like this letter to a monk where he's trying to make the monk feel better because his life can't be as bad as Abelard's is.
I
lost that. So your life better?
Wait, so it's basically pity me one-upsmanship?
Yeah,
it's that whole thing where
exactly
someone's having a bad day and someone else says, oh, don't feel bad. My day was even worse. Let me tell you in excruciating detail why you shouldn't feel like you've had a rough time and totally invalidate your feelings because okay.
This is the first paragraph of the Historia Calamitatum. There are times when example is better than precept for stirring or soothing human passions, and so I propose to follow up the words of consolation I gave you in person with the history of my own misfortunes, hoping thereby to give you comfort in absence. In comparison with my trials, you will see that your own are nothing, or only slight, and will find them easier to bear.
Okay. Do we have proof that he was castrated? I don't know. Did it really happen? Because if you make it poor guy feel bad that his eggplant was cut off, and it indeed was not, it's kind of harsh.
We should invite an Abelard scholar. I mean, Abelard is definitely an incredible theologian, but in real life, he was kind of a D. It sounds like.
Yeah, I not to make the worst fun imaginable, but yeah, he does sound like kind of a dick. And
so we hold up this quote unquote love story, and if you go to Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, in the 19th century, they built this, beautiful monument to Abelard and Heloise and buried them together. And it says something on the tomb about how they're reunited in death, and now their remains can be together. It's like, this is not a really great love story. Like, dude got his pupil pregnant, forces her against her will into a convent, and then gets castrated. Like, this is a weirdo love story. But
I don't know. Wait, but I think that's kind of like, aren't all love stories? I'm gonna be the cynic here. I think all love stories are that awfully tragic. At least the stories.
Well, there's tragic and then there's effed up. Okay. And this one seems to go more to the latter.
So like, if you're a guy, and let's just, for the sake of argument, I'm sure it was a bunch of guys who built the thing in Père Lachaise and, whatever. If you're a guy, the fact that you have control over this woman, and then she was alone in a convent forever after she was with you, that's sort of like a weirdo male fantasy, right? Like, you have all this control over this woman. I don't know. But I
But
think
that would have been up to her family too. And honestly, at that point in time, I doubt her uncle was upset because of what happened to her, but because she was property, and now her price went down.
well,
I mean, he could no longer marry her off the way that
true,
he.
but she and Abelard secretly married, so I think Abelard was essentially in control of what happened to her. Like, and he.
All right, Christine's right. He's just a dick.
I mean,
Wait. So they secretly married,
Mm-hmm.
but then he packs her off to the convent.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Continue.
So let's set all of what I've said aside for just a moment, and assume that we read Abelard and Heloise's story as charitably as you can read it, and they actually loved each other, and it was this great love, and they were separated by circumstance and wrote letters back and forth to each other because they loved each other so much but couldn't be together. Like, if that were the case, then that almost is the encapsulation of what these early Christian ascetics are saying. Like, they remain celibate so that they can, love God and love their fellow being, but not in a sexual way, in a way that takes kind of the norm of sexual expression and kind of flips it on its head, and they live lives more fully themselves because of it. So yeah, so that's sort of what I've been thinking about. And it's super weird, and I don't know what to do with it, but that is my murder, castration, and celibate desire portion of our Valentine's Day episode.
Wow.
But I appreciate you doing that, because I think one of the things that frustrates me the most, and this came up today, listeners, previously, Christine, Seth, and I have been talking all day about weird things you don't want to know. But one of the things we talked about was the essentialism of marriage. And yeah, I think everybody needs to realize that has not studied the ancient world. Marriage was not always the ideal. Seth's absolutely right. I can't say it enough. And so, as somebody that does family ethics and sexual ethics, this was not from the beginning of Christianity. So yeah, but I get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about that later.
Okay, so I'm going to talk. Seth, you're done? Okay.
I'm done.
Okay.
Lead us into more virtuous passion.
This is going to be awesome, guys, because
he all done.
I'm going to talk to you about St. Raphael the Archangel, my buddy, my pal. He's actually not one of my patrons, but I'm really fond of him anyway, so go figure. So a lot of people just don't know enough about Raphael. You say the name Raphael, and people will either think of the Ninja Turtle, which I get it, he's totally cool, awesome. Or if they're more educated, they might think of the painter, also cool, very fond of his style. There's clean lines, crisp colors, love it. But Raphael is actually the name of an archangel. His name, it means God has healed. He is the patron of healing and marriage, among other things. So I thought I would take this opportunity, since he is the patron of marriage and therefore sort of the more romantic love, to tell you guys about Raphael, so that your lives will be enriched by this knowledge. I'm certain of it. So Raphael is actually one of the three named angels in the Bible, and I'm specifically talking about the Catholic Bible, because he's named in the book of Tobit, which is part of, for our Protestant brothers and sisters, it's part of the Apocrypha. that a lot of you guys will have at the end of your Bible as books that are considered not canon but still sort of authoritative, whereas the Catholics just go full hog and they're like, yeah, this is canon. But if you just go to church on Sundays and not like during the week, in a 3-year cycle, you'll get like one reading from Tobit, and it's like one of the more boring parts. Whereas Tobit is it's basically an adventure slash action movie waiting to happen, and I'm so bummed. Like, why Hollywood keeps remaking movies but hasn't touched Tobit, I don't know. It's great. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible. So, in the book of Tobit, you have this guy. The book is named after this old guy, Tobit, who's lived a life of righteousness and compassion. And basically, like, the first couple of chapters are just talking about like what an awesome guy he was. And he has a son, he has a wife, and after doing all these righteous deeds, at one point some sparrows, he doesn't know he's standing under some sparrows, and their defecation lands in his eyes, which causes cataracts. I don't know how that science works, but we're just going to go with it. So he calls his son, and he tells his son, like, his fortune is off in another city with his like best friend from back in the day when he was going around. So he says his son is named Tobias, and he tells Tobias, hey, go find one of your kinsmen, like out among the tribe that lives around us. Find a kinsman and go off to this other city, this other town, where my friend lives, and he has care of my fortune. And so Tobias, being an obedient son, says, okay. And he goes out and he finds a kinsman. But what he doesn't know is that this kinsman is the Archangel Raphael undercover. As someone who used to be sort of an amateur angelologist, this alone tells you a lot about angels, at least in terms of the canon, that they can actually go undercover and like live lives as humans and, just be under their radar until the right moment. So Tobias hooks up with his kinsman, who's actually the Archangel Raphael, and they hit the road, and there's this cute little detail, and I don't know why it was included in the scripture, and I'm someone who believes that everything is included in scripture for a reason. So there's this interesting detail that they set off and they leave on their journey, and they're accompanied by a small dog. I don't know why the dog is important other than the fact that dogs are awesome. I certainly wouldn't want to hit the road on a long walking journey without a dog if that was an opportunity. So hooray for the dog. So they hit the road, and they're going along, and they stop by a river and catch some fish. And Raphael teaches Tobias how to fish, and he catches a big fish. And Raphael teaches him how to gut it, but keep the liver and the gall and what is the other part? There's three. It's like the liver, the gall, and the heart. That's right. And the heart of the fish. To keep those, and then they can eat the flesh. So Tobias does this, and they go, and they finally end up at the town where Tobias's friend is, Tobit's friend is. And now, in the meantime, the friend that's right, his friend's name was Raguel. So Raguel's daughter had been married 7 times. Daughter's name was Sarah. She'd been married 7 times, but every time she got married, before the marriage could be consummated, a demon came and killed her husband. Now, of course, people were starting to talk, because you marry a man, you don't even get to consummation, he ends up dead. That happens one time, it's sad. That happens a second time, it's a tragedy. That happens the third time, people start talking. And people were talking. In fact, the Bible says that the maid starts leveling accusations that you're killing these men. Well, she wasn't. This demon was being a jerk, because as demons do. So you have this set up in the book of Tobit. You've got, here's Tobias hitting the road with the Archangel Raphael. Here's Raguel and his daughter Sarah. And Sarah she wants to be married, but there's this demon that's troubling her. So eventually Tobias and Raphael show up at the home of Raguel. He's like, yes, I've got the wealth of the treasure of Tobias, my good friend. And, in the meantime, hey, I've got a daughter. You're a young man. You want to marry my daughter? And he's like, yeah, she's beautiful. Great wife. Awesome. And so they go through he's not going in blind, like not knowing that there hasn't been a problem. But Tobias says, we're going to do this. We're going to do it according to the law. And so Tobias marries Sarah.
You mean get married?
Yeah, get married. What did I say?
Well, you said do
Nothing,
it, and Seth is a dirty old.
Oh, right. Yeah, we will do this as in be married according to the law. According to the law of Moses, Seth. To be clear. So, what happens is Raphael tells Tobias to take the fish's liver and the heart. Remember, they were at the river going fishing. Take those and put them on the embers of the incense. And the odor of the fish repels the demon so that he flees from the dwelling of Raguel. This is actually...
The odor of the fish would repel just about anybody.
Yes, but this is actually an old tradition. A lot of the old incenses included asafoetida grass, which smells awful. And the idea is that foul stenches drive out that which is foul. It's part of why, one of the reasons given why vampires are repelled by garlic, is that which is evil is repelled by that which smells rough, evil. And if you've ever been, I've actually encountered some churches. You've ever been in a church that uses as their incense something that is kind of offensive to your nose? Like, it's not just heavy, but you're just like, ugh. That's because a lot of the older incense compositions, they're not frankincense or frankenmyrrh. And, nowadays a lot of the incenses are formulated to smell nice, to smell pleasant. But the old purification style incenses, they have something added to make them smell not so good. And traditionally it was asafoetida grass. So a lot of old tradition behind bad smells to drive out demons. So what happens is Tobias therefore drives the demon, and the demon's name, in fact, is Asmodeus, drives Asmodeus away, and then is able to proceed with the proceedings of marriage consummation. In the meantime, Raphael snatches up Asmodeus, fights him in the desert, locks him in the desert until the end of time, which, every time I read that, I just think of a great Hollywood action fight sequence. Listeners may not know, but Erica and Seth do, that I love action movies. I love kung fu movies, and this seems just made for a great kung fu Neo versus Agent Smith type fight scene with Raphael.
So, Asmodeus is probably one of my favorite demons. I mean, is that okay to say that I have a favorite demon? But I do. And if it were,
he actually shows up with the name in scripture. So
yeah,
and he had quite a racket going. He's like, oh, here's another wannabe husband. I'm going to kill him too. And this woman is miserable, and I'm ruining her life. It's great. But then, here comes Raphael. And everyone always underestimates Raphael. But he'll lay the beat down if he needs to, which he does in this case. So that happens. So the marriage of Tobias to Sarah is successful. he takes her and his father's fortune back to his father. So after 14 days after the wedding, they head home to Tobit and all of that. And so right before they get back home, Raphael tells Tobias, so you still have the gall of the fish, remember, because they've used the liver and the heart, still of the gall. The gall will make a medicine that will remove the cataracts from his eyes. So, use that. And they actually, he takes he ends up taking the gall of the fish and sort of blows it into Tobit's eyes. Not sure how that works, but maybe it was like the acid of the gall or something counteracted or peeled off the cataracts. I don't know. Anyways, Tobit's sight is restored at this time, and it's right after this that Raphael, because Tobit's going to pay Raphael, the kinsman, you accompanied my son, you did all those things, you guided him, you get a share of what he brought back. And Raphael is just like, let me talk to you in private. And that's when Raphael discloses who he is. And he reveals that he is the Archangel Raphael. He interestingly mentions that he is one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. This is the root of the tradition of the 7 archangels, of which 3 are named in canon, of Raphael being one, then Gabriel and Michael, and then most people assume that Uriel is the 4th because he was the big guy in the book of the prophet Enoch, which is not canon but is referenced by New Testament authors. So most people agree on Uriel, and then the identity of the other 3 is an ongoing, even all these centuries later, an ongoing debate. So, and then after that, Raphael departs, and that's the end of the book of Tobit. So Raphael, because he helped Tobias and Sarah get together, drove out the demon Asmodeus, who was preventing this marriage from happening, beat the tar out of him and imprisoned him in the desert to the end of time. That's what makes him the patron of marriage and sort of romance. He's also, because he knows so much about medicine, brings about healing. That is why he's the archangel. He's also the patron of doctors and healing and all of that. So that's Raphael. A lot of people overlook him because we don't actually talk about him much in church. And I mean, for good reason, Michael's been super popular the entire time. And of course, Gabriel has that starring role with Mary and Joseph in the Nativity story. So Raphael kind of gets overshadowed a bit, but I think he's a great saint and angel to know about. And he's the actual, Valentine's being associated with love, except in maybe the friendship, philia, agape way, doesn't make much sense. But Raphael being the actual patron of marriage and romance, that is utterly fitting for him. So that is Raphael.
Cool. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, that was cool. I did not know all that about Raphael. And I like Raphael.
That's, that's the official knowledge and canonical knowledge. There's also a lot of non-Catholic standard knowledge, because he's very popular outside of Catholicism as well. But I thought I would stick to the Orthodox this time around. Yeah.
Know your angels.
Angels are great. There's 3 named, but there's a lot more. And they're pretty cool.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. So now, Erica, what do you have to tell us about the theology of the body?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the theology of the body, and I guess I'm the token married person here, right? So love, I mean, Okay, all right. So here's the funny thing. When we decided that we were going to do Valentine's Day, and again, I'm happy that we didn't go all like gushy Valentine's Day, because I really don't have anything to say. I've been married since 2003. I've been with this guy since 2001. So, like, a lot happens in that time. I'm in love with him. I remember meeting him, but like marriage is different than that first meeting somebody where like your brain is firing and your endorphins are rushing and it's exciting and you're like, wow! And that's not that. I don't care what anybody says. That's not life. So like, you have happy moments, you have wonderful moments. Oh my gosh. And don't get me wrong. I love my boo. He's like the bestest husband ever, and we're bestest friends, and that's probably the best part of it. But the reason I want to bring up theology of the body is because it's kind of been a thorn in my side since I started doing sexual ethics about, oh Lord, of 15 years ago. So, and as a Catholic student, and as a student that went to Catholic universities, this always came up as being the way that we should view marriage and relationships together, sex between a man and a woman. And so don't get me wrong. Okay, so theology of the body, for those who don't know, sorry, getting ahead. It was actually a series of lectures given by Pope John Paul II. Between
JP the Two.
JP the Two. Yes, thank you, Christine.
Yeah, I know it.
I'm sorry for getting it incorrect. So it was given between 1979 and like 1984. And the topics, there was actually a wide range of topics, but at this point in time, it was actually interesting that birth control was fairly widely used, but completely against church teaching, as it is still today, unless you're using it for medical purposes. But I'm not even here to talk about birth control. But that was part of it. That's one thing that they talked about. He talked about, artificial insemination, types of reproductive assistance that is not approved of by the church. Definitely wasn't at that point in time. So there's a lot. There were a lot of lectures and a lot of conversations. However, one of the biggest, and eventually you can read all of this now because the lectures have been compiled into actual books. So there's different ways that they've put them together. You find one that is, easy to read for you and just go with it because they're all relatively the same. I believe, I haven't checked, but I believe you could probably also access some of this on the Vatican website because they have a wealth of information. They have all papal encyclicals, letters, exhortations, treaties. So you might want to look there too to see if you can find anything on theology of the body. So, but John Paul II, similar to Benedict, wrote quite a bit of actual theology. So it is not true that all popes write theology. Some popes are not theologians. They had other careers and other focuses. This is just like not all priests are theologians. Some priests have different careers. I knew a priest that was an amazing accountant. So they come from different walks of life, and though they all get trained in theology, the extent to which they are trained in theology varies between whomever it is. So certainly any pope knows his theology, but John Paul II, John Paul II, he wrote quite a bit on the relationship between men and women in marriage. Now, one of the nice things about his theology is that it is very beautiful. So it has a very lovely, very beautiful vision to it. And, parts of it are how things should be in a relationship between men and women. kind of like your ideal. If you were to think to yourself, well, what is the ideal state that I want my relationship to be in? That's very much what I believe truly that he was trying to get to in Theology of the Body. But here's my issue. When people started reading Theology of the Body, they were taking it almost too seriously. They were taking Theology of the Body as more of a manual of how they should live.
Hey, Mom, I ran my pants.
You okay?
I would also like to say that part of being married and having children is expecting that your life is never, ever going to be the same ever, ever again. And you single people, look, folks, you have it good. You have it really good. Now, granted, I get little snuggle monsters that are the most wonderful creatures on the face of the planet, but don't ever expect to go to the bathroom, do anything without little hands underneath your door. And even I bet there are college kids that come home and knock on the door while their mother is in the bathroom trying just to go. So, okay, sorry. My son interrupted me because he had a little bit of an accident. We're back on track. Okay.
It's okay.
So, as I was saying, one of the problems of Theology of the Body is that it doesn't match up with what is realistically happening between a couple as they go through marriage. Now, in fairness to JP the 2, how would he know this? He was a celibate man. He was never married. If he had a girlfriend, he was born in Poland, and we're looking at, very early on in the 20th century. Chances are it probably would have been a very traditional dating if he was dating a young lady. I'm not sure of when he went through ordination. So there are lots of things that you have to think about when you're thinking about the author that's writing this. Is it beautiful to read? Should you read it with your husband? Well, sure. Why not? I mean, I think any beatific vision of what life can be is not necessarily a bad thing. However, when you are telling married couples that every single sexual act between them is going to be enjoyable and blissful, I would say that most of us are going to start cackling, potentially give you the finger depending on the mood that we're in. And put our foot on it. That's not realistic. And I think when folks started reading this, especially women, their feeling on it was that they were not really being heard because this is not reality. The reality of marriage is wonderful, and it is extremely messy. And not everything works out. Not every time you try to have a loving moment with your husband works out. And if you have kids, it works out even less. So we're not looking at something that is based in people's actual experience. This is not epistemological, which means it's not sensory based of the world around you. This is something that was more metaphysical, something that was more imaginative. So, but I hear so many people, particularly people who aren't married, which I find funny, talking about how great Theology of the Body is. Well, get married, try to have dates with your husband, try to make every time this blissful, amazing act, and you're going to find out that life falls short of what this particular text contemplates and says. There's also a line of natural law, and if you want to hear more on my talk on natural law, go back a couple episodes to Thomas and Friends where I'm talking about natural law. But he's using natural law in a way that it makes this essential. So the greatest good, the summum bonum, according to Aquinas, of every single life, of every man and woman on the planet, is to get married and have kids, according to Theology on the Body. Again, that's not realistic. There are a lot of people who are never going to get married. We have priests, we have nuns. There are many people who get married and find out they cannot have kids. And adoption is not listed as a good as great as having biological children. And I think that that's bullshit, quite frankly. So there's a lot of problems with this. There's a lot of problems when we talk about sexual ethics, when we talk about the theology of the body, that actual experience is not taken into account in what these theologians, predominantly celibate men, are writing. And I will stand on my platform all freaking day, because in the end, there's a lot of people reading this that don't know any better, that haven't done the research, that haven't had somebody tell them, hey, you know what? This isn't terribly realistic. It's not even medically sound. So take it for what it is. Take it as something that you would like your marriage to look like. Certainly, if this applies to you, that you would like to have this very spiritual relationship with your spouse. But if it's not working out the way JP the 2 says, then don't feel so badly about it, because it's not the manual of your life, and it's not exactly how everything is going to unfold. Personal story. I basically had to fight. I was working for the Archdiocese at the time, that I had to have a medical procedure done, hysterectomy. Had to have my tubes tied because of I have a lot of autoimmune problems. Everything was medically documented. Now, in working for the Archdiocese, it was not covered by my insurance. I had to go and plead my case to the cardinal in order to have this covered. It wasn't a case of I could turn the paperwork into the insurance company. No, I had to basically throw myself before somebody in order to say that this had to be done. So I think these are the type of, and to me that's archaic. I'm sorry. When women ask to have a medical procedure done, I have not met many women that would go through certain procedures like that unless they were necessary. So for a man to ask me if, oh, well, are you open to having kids? I have 2 kids. Yeah, I'm open to having kids. I'm also open to not dying. So it's a difficult situation. But those of you listening who are married, who find yourself with these problems, by all means, stick to your belief system. I'm not asking you to go out of your belief system. What I am asking is that you also look at other evidence, be it scientific, be it asking somebody who does sexual ethics in the Catholic Church, who is well read. Ask somebody about your feelings about what you're doing to make sure that you're not just going along with a line of thinking because that's all that's been presented to you. There are a lot of misreadings of theology of the body. There's a lot of misreadings on natural law, and you have to find the best sources possible so that you can make good decisions. And I always say, definitely in my marriage, some of the best memories and funniest moments have been things that were not planned and did not work out exactly like they were supposed to. And just for kicks, a couple of those. Every single time my husband and I have tried to go out for our anniversary, we always end up at Taco Bell. Our reservations have been lost. Our table was given away to another couple one night. And so this is like a running joke between us. But now it's fun. It's just funny. It's something that we've built up together. Also, and Seth can attest to this, the DJ at our wedding started playing like the disco version of the song we requested instead of the actual love song, which I almost killed the DJ, but it turned out to be okay. But that's another thing. We laugh about it now. So marriage is not always perfect. It has its ups and downs. It requires self-sacrifice. It requires putting yourself aside when you feel you need to as much, because I hear all the time now, sorry, another soapbox. I hear all the time now, well, I have to take care of me first. I got to take care of me, and then I can take care of everybody else. Yeah, yes. You do need to take care of yourself. But sometimes, especially in your marriage, you have to sacrifice something to love the other person. And I think when you sacrifice, when you're able to give part of yourself for your spouse or for your kids, that's kind of one of the places where you find how much you love them and how deeply you love them. So those are my thoughts on Valentine's Day. That's about it. That's all I got.
Wow, I'm so glad we didn't go mushy. We just went weird action movie reality show. So great. Love it. Love it. This is why I love you guys. So great. Like, there's none of that marriage is why we are here today.
True love.
Although Princess Bride, absolutely great movie.
Oh my gosh. Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Oh, classic. Okay, so.
Well, I love you guys.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Lots of philia and agape up in here. So we have next week. Next week we are going to be doing, since the week after is Mardi Gras and Ash Wednesday. But since we record on Wednesdays, it'll be a little too late to address it at that time. So we're going to address it next week. We're going to be talking about seasons of feasting and seasons of fasting. So I guess that's it from us this week. Do either of you have any last words?
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah. Yes, after
Go out
everything.
and love somebody.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be with you guys.
Ghostbusters. Wait, we can bring Ghostbusters again in. Go out and sing Your Love is Lifting Me Higher.
Oh, yes. Yes. Every time I hear that song, I think of the Statue of Liberty walking down the street.
I mean, really, it's awesome.
That's the second one, right?
Yes, that is the
that's
second
number
one.
2.
Yes, absolutely. So we will be back with you guys next week. Until then, happy Valentines, and later.
Bye-bye.